So hello everyone and welcome to this week's RigER webinar. Today we're going to talk about cybersecurity awareness. As the importance of having a well-planned and executed information security awareness program in a company is higher than ever. A business with a well-trained and information security aware personnel is much less likely to suffer from today's cyber threats. That is why today we will talk about establishing a corporate cyber culture. And today we'll discuss what is idea of cybersecurity and cybersecurity awareness, what are the common threads in the cyber world and the weakest links in the chain. We'll talk how we can raise awareness, and we'll share some training, testing, and learning important lessons. So at the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session where you can ask any questions that you may have during the presentation. You can see the Q&A icon on the Zoom control panel. Please type all your questions there and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. And now let's get started. And I want to pass microphone to Arsen. Hello, Arsen.
Hello, Dasha. Thank you. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and let's start today's webinar. As Dasha mentioned, the information security and cybersecurity aspect today is way more important than it ever was. The trends are growing and securing your information, especially inside your organization, is vital. So let's take a look at how you can optimize and manage the information security awareness inside your organization within your staff and understand how you can establish a corporate cyber culture within your organization. So just to give a brief explanation, what we consider cybersecurity, also sometimes called IT security. Well, the practice of cybersecurity, as again defined by Wikipedia, is the protection of computer systems and networks from theft or damage, however it may occur. The software, the hardware, the transmission of your information. And by information in cybersecurity, we consider all types of digital information. Those being your office files, your pictures, videos, media files, your emails, anything that is electronically stored on any type of a hard drive or media, be it in your computers, in the data centers in the cloud, in flash drives, etc., etc. Also, everything that is transmitted through local networks, because the transmission of your information to another destination does not occur as a direct contact. Your information travels through several computers and hubs. So it is important to understand how you can secure your information and what it takes to have your information secure. So just some statistics about the global information security market. It was predicted in 2020, it was forecasted that the market will be valued at $170 billion as of 2022. We are in the middle of 2021, and that figure already is way over the forecast. It's at 179.96 billion USD worth of information security market worldwide. The growth forecast of the information security market is predicted to reach $372 billion by 2022. And that's about 10.9% compound annual growth rate. That's a significant increase from what we have seen, because on the left side on your screen, you can see that just in 2004, we had the market value of the information security at $3.5 billion. So it's a trend that is growing rapidly. It's a trend that is getting employed by many organizations. The information becomes more and more vulnerable to different types of creative attacks. So it's very important to understand how you can secure it. So another slide for the statistics about the data breaches. Now, the first half of 2029 exposed about 4.1 billion records. Due to COVID and some other technical measures that we have gone through during this pandemic lifestyle, that figure for the first half of 2021 reached about 19 billion. exposed records. And that's only 1,700 publicly reported breaches that we have witnessed. That figure is significantly higher because as we consider only 40 to 45% of breaches get reported publicly. Now, this figure has many implications, and there are a lot of reasons this figure reached this high value. For instance, the remote working during the COVID-19 pandemic increased the data breach costs in the United States alone by about $140,000. So the scams, the phishing attacks, and the spamming emails increased by 400% just over the first month of the pandemic. So the lockdown started and everything increased by 400%. Now, just to give you an idea, the global average cost of a data breach is considered to be somewhere near $3.86 million for just a single data breach that can expose potentially up to several million records. This figure in the United States in 2020 averaged at the highest total cost of $8.64 million. So if we kind of do an average per person, we will get about $150 of cost per lost or stolen record per person. So let's move ahead and understand how we can actually deal with the threats in today's cyber world, how we can establish a corporate cyber culture, what we need to do, and what are the general steps that are considered as kind of a standard within any kind of a secure organization. What is corporate cyber culture? It's the notion that your employees, your staff, your contractors, everyone in your organization is aware of the cyber threats, is aware how to operate correctly with information, with digital information, and not only, and understands how to deal with occurred or potentially probable to occur incidents. So establishing a corporate cyber culture involves several steps, and they can be basically divided into three main sections that your organization may need to consider. First of all, obviously, the management needs to commit. Unless the management decides to commit and unless the management takes the necessary steps, the corporate cyber culture will not be in place, will not be implemented, and no one will actually care about it. So the commitment of the management can start at evaluating where you stand right now. What is your current situation? What do you have? Where is your information security at this point? What assets do you have? What assets need to be protected? What assets can be considered low risks, and so on and so forth. After understanding your current situation, you will need to plan your next steps. You might need to implement information security policy. You might define some procedures that will follow your processes, business processes. You can do, you can assess your risks, and so on and so forth. After planning the steps and understanding what steps you need to take, it's going to be the time to implement those new measures. And after implementation, you will be constantly overseeing how it works and learning lessons from some situations that lead to potential vulnerabilities and fixing those. It's kind of evolving into a cycle, and you constantly follow that cycle and understand how you can be at your peak performance in the means of your information security. So the next major and very, very important step in this cycle of establishing a corporate cyber culture would be the security awareness of your staff, of the members of your organization. Every single employee, every single contractor, or every other person that has access, physical or digital, to your information assets will need to understand what he can do or what she can do with that, what is prohibited, where your policies are, what you allow and don't allow. So the principles, the policies, the procedures that you have in your company need to be clearly defined and communicated to to the members of your organization. The next steps would be to identify all the people that require security awareness training or some sort of education, and train them, educate them, and raise the security awareness within those people. Now, after training, obviously, you should kind of practice, your employees should practice and somehow promote internal cybersecurity, and your employees will need to understand the exact principles that you actually that they actually need to follow. The second part of the security awareness, this second part leads to the third part, which is the employee commitment. They will need to understand, as I just said, what they can do, what they can't do. They will need to follow all the guidelines and the principles that you define, and sometimes it will need to be enforced. Sometimes your employees will be more diligent and exercise caution and understand the consequence of their actions, just as usual. You will also need to kind of stress test the employee commitment, to observe, to get feedback, to gather suggestions and understand whether you have any weak points and whether you need to improve in some places. You can also review the performance levels of the employees and the performance levels of management circle to understand if the employed measures are working. And if they're not, you can obviously adapt changes. So basically the main cornerstone of establishing a corporate cyber culture, is to have a defined and working information security policy. So what is information security policy? It's going to be a paper that will contain all the do's, don'ts, processes, procedures that involve any kind of information asset, and will identify the steps and the processes that the hierarchy within your organization needs to take to be able to basically protect that information assets. So just a basic template would be to base the information security policy off of the standard triad, which is the CIA triad, as you can see on your screen. It's basically based on confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your information. So it ensures that your information is confidential and can be viewed within the organizations by only people who you allow to. It ensures the integrity of your information or information assets, and the availability of those. So anytime anyone can access that information if he has the right to do so, or she has the right to do so. So when you have the information security policy in place, it'll basically allow you to have a better understanding where you stand. How good is your information security policy implemented within the organization? What weak points you might have. It will also allow you to streamline all your business processes and have a clear path for kind of reducing or mitigating the potential or existing risks that your business might face. It will also allow you to have, I don't want to say full, but close to full control. And I don't want to say full because sometimes your information might be residing in the cloud that is not 100% controlled by your organization, but it will allow you to have full control over your information or the measures that govern your information. So having an information security policy is, regardless of the size of your company, it is highly advisable and it's really a good thing, just to put it in simple terms. So what is cybersecurity awareness? What and how it actually complements or aids towards the establishment of the cybersecurity culture within your organization? Well, cybersecurity awareness is basically the knowledge and the attitude of the members of your organization towards the protection of your information and informational assets. So to raise or to have a cybersecurity awareness program, you will need to basically take several steps that encapsulate all the process of raising the security awareness within your organization. First, you will need to educate your staff, the members of your organization, your employees, your contractors, on the security principles, on your information security policy, the business processes, the guidelines, and educate them how to follow those. Then, if necessary, in most cases it is, you will need to organize some formal types of security awareness trainings and allow your members of your organization to go through the training and raise awareness towards some common threats, towards how to correctly deal with incidents, and so on and so forth. After having your people go through trainings, you will also need to consider testing the results of those trainings, and testing your employees on how efficient the trainings were for them. And if there are some weak points, you'll also need to identify those and basically repeat the same cycle all over again. Even if you do not run into weak points, you are not able to identify any, and the training was great, you will most probably need to repeat the training cycle at least every 6 months, because the digital world evolves very, very fast, and the trends change, and the new threats, new types of threats emerge kind of daily. So it is very important to be up to date. It is important to understand the potential new and existing risks and how to deal with those. So that's going to lead us to the next slide, and we are going to discuss some common threats, and everything from this slide and later is going to contribute to the process of creating the security awareness program, and by that just securing the establishment of a corporate cyber culture within your organization. So what kind of common threats are there in the digital world today? Now, the viruses, the worms, Trojans, the ransomware, which is gaining popularity within the last couple of years, most reliable technique for the hackers, the social engineering and phishing. We're going to talk about all of them briefly in the next couple of few slides. So let's kind of divide into two main categories: the digital threats of the digital world and the threats that exercise human weakness. And so the first part is going to imply viruses, worms, Trojans, any type of other malware, which is basically computer code that does something that you do not want that code to do. Ransomware. Those, all of these are code. They are capable of self-replicating. They can copy themselves to your computer, within your flash drive, within your network, so on and so forth. Some of them can, for instance, Trojans can open a backdoor for external access to your device by the person who implanted the Trojan within your device. The ransomware, as already I mentioned, it gained popularity, so-called popularity, within the last couple of years. is a piece of software, a piece of code that when entered into your device or your network is going to parse through all of your information, then lock that information, then demand a ransom for that information. Basically, your information is going to be unusable. And even if you pay the ransom, there is no guarantee that your information will be unlocked or not deleted. So it's one thing to consider. It is very important to understand how to deal with such types of attacks and how to secure against those. There are plenty of ransomware simulators online, so that can be kind of a measure that your organization might want to take. The other main category or the type of digital world threat would be the threats that involve the human factor or exercise the vulnerability of the human factor. And by that, we can define the social engineering, the phishing, smishing, spear phishing, scams, whaling, so on and so forth. There are quite a few dozens of types of those social engineering attacks, which basically exercise the main weakness of the human nature. They exploit the trust of people, or they exploit the psychological weaknesses of people, and they gain some results from that. For instance, in the slide right here, we are seeing on the left part of the slide, we are seeing an email example based on very, very popular COVID-19 topic, which basically asks a person to do something urgently. And there is a link that the receiver is asked to, will not ask, but pointed to click add to gain more information and so on and so forth. If we hover over that link with our mouse, we can see that the link we see and the actual link concealed under this text are two different things. And this process, when you click on the link, is going to allow the attacker to perform something that was pre-programmed as a result of the click action that the user does. So it can either lead to a malicious page, it can fakely asks for your credentials, for example, just to log into your email account, and so on and so forth. So scam, phishing, and social engineering attacks are not rare. They are very common, and they basically encounter for the most weaknesses of the digital world as of today. Well, yeah, the weakest link in the chain, us humans. So let's talk about ourselves and understand why 95% of cybersecurity breaches up to this date are caused by a human error. So we, as humans, we tend to trust. Some of us may be not well educated on the subject. We just might not know how to work with a computer, or how to use email, or how to use the email securely, so on and so forth. Some of us will neglect the directions and the policies that we were given. Some will actually knowingly ignore, and that's also a very popular case, I would say. Some people will act as insiders and will represent a threat within the organization. So just to give some simple statistics on the insiders. So by 2018, 34% of organizations worldwide suffered from the insider threats. And those can be your ex-staff members who still have access to your internal information systems. Those can be employees that are somehow unsatisfied. Those can be the ones that are stealing information from your organization and selling it to your competitors. There can be a lot of cases. So in 2018 alone, that figure was 34% within the organizations that this statistics was based on. In 2020, that figure rose almost twice. It's 61% of companies that were suffering or had some kind of an insider threat that caused a breach of information. Just to continue, what is the motivation behind the insider attacks? Some, just 55%, is fraud, basically. Some just chase cash. They want to sell information, competitive information, and gain money from that. Others also encountered about 44% of the intellectual property theft. So that is also a very significant thing to consider when you try to secure the internal processes or the information within your organization. And intellectual property will need to be identified and considered as a high business risk containing information, and will need to be protected accordingly. So by statistics, the top threat actors, insider threat actors, were 63% of privileged IT users. The IT department that you have sometimes will allow just a simple technician to have admin privileges or escalated privileges. That is one thing that you will need to consider also, and have a proper access control implemented and periodically reviewed. 60% of those actors, insider threat actors, were managers which had access to a sensitive information. Those can lead to just selling that information. This can lead to just managers might not be able to protect the information the way they are supposed to, and they can lose that information. 57% of the actors were contractors and consultants, and 51% were just simple employees who either neglected or ignored your internal information security policies and your established corporate cyber culture. So what do you need to do to raise security or cyber security awareness within your organization? Well, first, you'll need to train. You will need to educate your employees and the members of your organization on the matters. You will need to define and employ a cybersecurity awareness program, which will train, test, and just go through that cycle over and over again to have your members of your organizations educated and always cautious and basically just exercising common sense. The security awareness program that you will need to employ, you might want to consider to understand, train to understand the importance of the information security and the impact of the decisions that your staff make within the organization. If I click this button, will this button somehow affect negatively the business process within the organization? Or am I going to download a virus? Or am I doing something that I'm going to need to verify, so on and so forth. You will also need to train your staff to be able to identify potential threats and understand how to deal with those. So viruses, social engineering, emails, scams, phishing, etc., etc. Your employees need to be able to open the email, for example, see that there is a link, there is some sense of urgency and some inconsistency, and understand that email can be a fraud or a phishing email too. And they will also need to always verify any kind of information that they receive, at least from two sources. So if, again, back to the example, if they receive the email from the HR department asking them to provide some details or just to follow a link, it's not a bad practice just to give a call to the HR department and ask whether the email was actually sent by them. So just exercise some caution and verify information. You'll also need to train your employees, your members of your organization, how to actually identify the information security incidents and how to deal with those. And if a time comes that they are not able to deal with the incident themselves, how to escalate those incidents and who is going to be the next person in the chain of responsibility. And actually the most common topics that really demands training is for your users to use strong and unique passwords and just visit websites that are either verified or trusted. So there are a lot of antivirus or firewall programs and web browser plugins that will allow you to see a risk rating for every type of a website that you actually open. So it's a good practice to just basically attach that plugin to your web browser. And anytime you kind of have the intent or suddenly accidentally visit a malicious website, that website either gets blocked or you just receive a pop-up window with information that allows you to understand that it is not safe to go there, not to browse there. The next step within the establishing of your cybersecurity awareness program would be to basically test whatever you train your employees and understand if there is a negative outcome and learn lessons from that. So you can conduct regular tests for the members of your organization. Just kind of randomly interview the employee on the subject that you trained. You can and you will need to observe and test the commitment of your employees, your managerial levels, and the commitment overall towards the corporate cyber culture. You will need to verify all the access levels and have a distinctly defined and governing procedure for the access level for all the users that have access to any type of information within your organization. The access level is very, very important topic, and when implemented correctly, it can reduce the threats and the risks of your information being compromised by a factor of maybe 10 or 12 or 15, I don't know, but it can reduce it drastically. We'll also need to verify, again, password strength, enforce by company policy, maybe regular password changes, and so on and so forth. You can run phishing campaigns or outsource that to some company that can run phishing campaigns towards your organization. You can also run simulated ransomware attacks and so on and so forth. And gathering and considering suggestions from your employees and gathering feedback is also a very good practice. So you can maybe see something that you were not able to identify, but they saw it clearly. So just gather feedback and consider their suggestions as kind of part of a testing and learning the lessons. So when you do testing, you will most likely encounter some weak points and some potentially vulnerable weaknesses that you will need to deal with. So you deal with those according to your internal information security policy and the procedures. You train your employees on the changes and regular security trends. And you basically repeat the same cycle over and over and over again, just to keep your staff, your organization up to date to the latest security threats of the digital world and capable of handling those in a regular, calm, and very easy manner. So that will kind of encapsulate all these steps that you will need to take when you're considering the creation of the cybersecurity awareness program. So training, testing, learning lessons from the tests that you can identify, and basically repeating over and over and over again. Just some best practices before we go to our Q&A session. So what you can do as best practices, what is considered to be a best practice in today's digital world. These are just some very, very high level things that you might need to consider when you are dealing with information and need to increase the information security level within your organization. You will need to understand the level of the information security you need and you have. And if there is a gap between that, you will need to understand how to close that gap, or at least get to a point where the risks are either minimal or can be considered acceptable. And in the process of closing that gap, you will need to, again, define an information security policy, plan your steps, what you need to do, understand your business processes, and understand what information procedures you will need to employ that can either aid or govern those business processes. Establish a corporate cyber culture and train your employees towards security awareness and raise the security awareness within your organization. You might also consider assigning dedicated IT people and dedicated IT personnel who will actually deal with the information security, who will constantly assess some aspects of your internal IT systems and maybe identify the weak spots. You can take into account the access levels, understand who needs what types of access to the information assets within your organization, and basically implement a good access control. That's really important. Use strong passwords, usual, and whenever possible, use encrypted network connections and secure, trusted software. So this kind of very few of the most important best practices that you can employ when you want to just raise the security awareness within your organization. All right, thank you, and take good care of your information assets. We'll see you next time.